Okay, thank you so much for being here.
Oh,
Um,
you're welcome. Thank you. I appreciate
Honestly,
it.
this is like a little, not to date myself, but like I grew up watching everything that you've made.
Oh, thank
Um, so this is like a little surreal for me
you.
in a good way.
Yeah,
And I wanted to say, first of all, just congratulations on the
thank
show
you.
coming out.
Thanks.
I imagine there were probably some initial hiccups with producing this during a pandemic, but I'm so happy to see it coming out.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there were definitely hiccups, and I'm glad it didn't come out in 2020. I like didn't want it associated with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, there were definitely. We kind of all started working from home around March.
Yeah.
Um, and as far as doing a lot of the work like boards and designs and backgrounds and stuff, all that stuff kind of continued.
Mm-hmm.
But we had to figure out, well, how do we mix shows? Like stuff we would do remotely, like we'd go to a stage to mix a show, or we'd go
Yeah.
outside to an outside vendor to do online. How do we do that? So we did have to kind of figure out the mechanics of like, how do we work from home uh, with these places where we need outside vendors. The other thing we had to figure out was like, we're doing this show in digitally, and it was like, how do we share these files? Like,
Yeah.
our studio in Mercury Filmworks up in Ottawa, they've got huge servers in their studios, and the animators are all sharing all this stuff. But as soon as they had to go home,
Mm-hmm.
there's just this technical difficulty of like, how do we pull this off?
Yeah.
But we were able to, everybody was able to figure it out, and we were able to keep making the show. So
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. Congrats to you and the crew.
thank
I'm
you.
glad it doesn't seem like there were any hiccups. So it's like a
No, and the
testament to
quality,
how quick things were.
yeah, the quality didn't suffer at all. It just sort of like just slowed us down for a bit.
Yeah. And then I saw, reading up on the show, I saw that you started developing it as a comic in 2009. And then I
Mhm.
saw when you initially pitched this and started working with Netflix on this in 2018, you had pitched them an animatic.
Mhm.
So how different was that animatic from the actual inevitable first episode?
The animatic that I showed them is probably 97% of what we actually produced
Yeah.
the first episode of the show. It
Wow.
really didn't change at all. It's
Yeah.
pretty much the same thing.
That's
I
amazing.
showed it to them, and they were like, okay, can you finish this story now and keep making it?
That's great. Yeah, I absolutely like right from the get-go, even like the cute little like Netflix original stamp, like I just
Mm.
the textures of this show were, oh, they were like to die for, and like
Oh,
the
good.
color palette and like the art direction in general. I saw Sandra Lee was the art director there. So, what was it like developing the style of the show?
The style I started looking at, like, because the show Kid Cosmic is really grounded in reality, right?
Yeah.
These aren't cartoon characters, right? They're regular people,
Hmm.
but yes, it's animated and it's a cartoon. What design can I look at that balanced real life and cartooniness really well? And the thing I was drawn towards was print cartoonists, really, like Hank Ketcham's Dennis the Menace, but
Hmm.
more specifically Hergé's Tintin.
Hmm.
Like, I love Tintin. I grew up with the Tintin stories, and they're all cartoon characters, but they feel tactile and real, and they inhabit a very real world.
Hmm.
So I started looking at that of like, how far do you push the cartooniness, the silliness, and the artifice of it, and how do you kind of ground it in reality?
Yeah, I kind of got like old school Peanuts vibes from it. I
Yeah,
say old school like the whole thing isn't old school, but you know what I
yeah.
mean. And then something else that I was noticing it just because of my own animation background. I promise I wasn't like being pulled out of the story, but
Mhm.
like there were times where the animation or even like a specific like body part or something, it just felt like some things were like animated on twos or threes. Sometimes it felt like there were fours in there
Yep.
too.
Mhm.
And it was so playful, and it kind of made me think that maybe you were trying to emulate a comic book. It's just panels and you have like the gestures that you can only get in like a couple panels. So I was
Mhm.
wondering what it was like developing the animation language of the show, and like how you developed like the limits to like what you said, that it was like not an overly cartoony cartoon.
Mhm. Well, that was the animation style was really kind of developed by our animation director, Justin Nichols,
Hmm.
who was also one of our directors and an amazing board artist, and did a lot for boarding, like the filmic language of the show. He was the one suggesting, like, let's put stuff on threes, let's put stuff on fours, let's not go super squashy and stretchy, because once you go squashy and stretchy, it starts becoming fake. It starts
Mhm.
becoming a cartoon, quote
Yeah.
unquote. And so we wanted just the behavior and the posing and the timing to feel a little more natural and without being super realistic, you know. And also, like, well, you don't need it to be super fluid and on ones all the time, you
Mhm.
know. Just kind of make it really kind of poppy and iconic and almost replicating what we were doing in the animatics, you know. You know, in the animatics, you don't fully pose it out, but it still communicates the story. So
Yeah.
we're like, well, do we need it fully animated even more than what we've done in the animatics? So sort of looking at it from that perspective.
I feel like 1,000 board artists just screamed, "Yes, what he said."
Right. Well, because that was what was interesting is when we were working on Wander Over Yonder, and I love that show and I love the animation on that show. We were finding that we were giving our animatics to like our, you know, executives, and they would take it home and show it to their kids, and their kids loved watching the animatics. So
Yeah.
it's like, okay, well, the animatics are communicating. Maybe we don't need to go much further than that, you
Mhm.
know, in every scene.
Yeah. No, that's it's definitely noticeable in like a
Hmm.
very good way that it
Oh,
was
good.
like
Thanks.
it yeah, like it felt more grounded is like the word. Not to
Mhm.
I mean, we've already said it a bunch. So then that makes me wonder, yeah, because it's like Powerpuff Girls was, as far as I know, like traditionally
Yep.
animated, and then Foster was Flash, which is like
Mhm.
crazy to think about because I think
Mhm.
Flash was like retired this year.
Right.
And then Wanderer and Kid Cosmic were done in Toon Boom.
Mhm.
So for you, I mean, for me, it's always cool to see your work because you're somebody that like you still board on your projects. You did some character design for this. Obviously,
Mhm.
like this was your original story,
Right.
and your other shows, they were your ideas as well. But for you, like, how has the tool set shifting affected you, or has it affected you at all as an artist? Um, and like, or maybe more so, like how you show run or anything like that.
Well, it definitely we're able to kind of get a better understanding of what the show's going to turn out like. You know, when we were doing Powerpuff, you know, we would just be boarding on paper, 3 panels per sheet. We, you know, slug the board, we do the X sheets, and we'd send it off.
Mm-hmm.
And then we wouldn't know what it was actually going to feel like until we got the work print back,
Yeah.
you know. And you know, sometimes it was like, wow, that turned out incredible, that was amazing. Or sometimes like, okay, how do we make this work?
Mm-hmm.
And that's just sort of the process of it. But with the advent of this digital technology, especially digital storyboarding, we're able to kind of get the show up on its feet prior to even animating it. So you're able to see like, oh, what's really working? Is the timing working here? Are these cuts working? Do we need other shots? um, it's also been great for me because I kind of get really picky about things being on model,
Yeah.
right? And I just always have, because you know, design is super important. So when you're doing a show with these digital assets, these kind of digital puppets,
Yeah.
you never really have to worry about how the boards are drawn, right? Because they're going to be pulling in the on model characters and animating with them. So you never have to like really stress about like,
Mm-hmm.
well, that board artist draws the characters this way and this board artist draws the characters this way,
Yeah.
because you know it's all going to come together cohesively in the execution when the animators get their hand on it, which is
Yeah.
great. You know, there were so many times like on Powerpuff or Dexter's, I would just be calling retakes on the thing was drawn wrong. You know, like, oh, let me redraw this scene or whatever. And that just, you know, that takes a lot of time. Just
Yeah.
redrawing a board, even though it's boarded well, it may not be drawn great. And
Yeah.
like the fact that I don't have to do that anymore is just fantastic.
That's crazy. I didn't even think about that because it's like the 2D pipeline was always, yeah, like you storyboard and then you like blow it up, and that's almost like what it is going to become. Not like a keyframe, but like kind of, yeah. And like now
Yeah,
you don't have to do that because they are rigs.
yeah. You don't have
That's
to think
wild.
about it.
Yeah, I can't even just like hearing that. I'm just like, oh yeah, like that would completely change the workflow.
Yeah,
Um,
and there would be times that would happen, we would notice with our overseas studios when it was all hand drawn, is we'd have boards that were kind of drawn really rough around the edges and needed a lot of help.
mm-hmm.
And then there were boards that were beautifully drawn that we loved. But what would happen is the ones that were really well drawn wouldn't go to their A teams, and the boards that needed a little help would go to the A teams.
Mm-hmm.
So we never really got an episode that looked amazing. And like
Yeah.
it all kind of became this middle ground of just, you know,
Yeah.
yeah, that looks great. That looks great. You
Mm-hmm.
know.
Oh my gosh, that's like Sorry, that's like I love talking process.
Yeah, oh, yeah, me too.
Because actually I was like, I don't want to waste your time asking
Oh
this,
no, fine.
but like something that I was wondering, my background, I've only really worked with like CG animation. So yeah, I was wondering about the job of like the layout artist here, but now that's a bit more clear. And then I saw that there's also like scene planning. I see that in credits of 2D a lot, and I didn't quite know the difference between the scene planning and like the layout, and how, if those are even related. Maybe not, and you're about to school me, which by all means.
They're sort of the same thing. Like it's layout and scene planning are very similar. It's sort of like, a lot of times when board artists will draw, they'll just, draw quickly and stage things and maybe put a lot of effects or whatever and things, just to kind of dress up a scene. And then usually you want to have a process, and sometimes people call it workbook, where you just kind of look at the scene and going, well, if we just change the angle, we could reuse that background. Or do we need those effects? Does that have to be there?
Mm-hmm.
That process isn't really integrated as a step in production anymore. You're sort of doing that as you're producing it. And we do that, what I'll do is when we ship an episode to Mercury, I will go through scene by scene and saying, recenter the characters here, or change this background, or don't do these effects. And that's sort of my kind of doing workbook, or, quote unquote, layout without redrawing anything.
Yeah.
And just giving them direction on how they should handle it.
Oh, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I know a really exciting thing about this show is this is your first story with an overarching narrative.
Yeah.
And I have to ask, did you have it figured out? Maybe more like the larger story beats. Did you have that figured out by the time you were writing episode 1, or did the story change at all during the course of that? Like, was there ever a time where the story beats, like the larger ones, were locked in?
Yeah, there definitely was a time where they were locked in. I mean, I knew the arc I wanted to, I knew what I wanted Kid to go through, right?
Yeah.
I knew the story where he needed to land. But when I first started at Netflix, I knew I was doing 10 episodes for season 1. And when I first started there, I didn't even have a line producer. I didn't have anybody on the staff.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just go in every day and go, okay, I got 10 episodes. What are they going to be? What's the story I'm going to tell? So I would just on my own sort of figure out the real kind of the foundational aspect of each episode. Like, it needs to start here, and the kid needs to be here by the end of this one. And this is what I think is happening in the episode.
Mm-hmm.
Then once we got the writing staff on and the directing staff on, we would go, okay, we're doing this episode now, and this is the beginning, middle, and end of the story. And then we would break it out in detail. And we might find little things like, oh, that's great, let's move that here, and not have this happen in this episode, but have that happen in this episode. But the overall story and theme and the emotional thing he went through didn't change at all. It sort of stayed intact. Just how we executed it and how we communicated it evolved and changed a bit.
Yeah, because I know for me, just as a watcher, the like mid show, like the government getting involved and the Space Force Enforcement Force, which like fantastic name. Like that was such a fun, unexpected thing for me. And I was just like, whoa, I was like, how did they come up with this? But it was just like, it felt so like, I was just like, where is this going to go? Like, I like, there's so many ways they could go. And then like, that was it. And I was like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that. And it was really cool.
Right. Well, I like to follow, different people follow different story structure things. And I'm kind of a big Save the Cat guy.
Yeah.
And like, when I first discovered Save the Cat, it was just like, oh, that's what you call that thing. It was like, that's sort of the way my instincts work storytelling wise, but then like giving it a name and kind of treating it like Mad Libs a little bit, like, okay, I need this to happen here and this to happen here. It just gives you sort of a story structure. So that sort of helped us break the episodes and know where they were going to go. Like, I know we need this episode where it feels like everything's going to be great, and then the next episode, everything's going to fall apart, right? That's just the nature of storytelling.
Yes.
So then it's just a matter of finding, oh, well, how do you do that? And I the thing with Earth Force Enforcement Force, I just like the idea that the kid would have to face off about the team he really would want to be on. Like, that's what he really wanted. Like, that was his dream, if he could be one of those guys. That's what he wanted. So I like the idea that team became sort of his foils a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So then I take it. Well, I guess I don't know. I'm like I don't know with you because again, like you had so many writing credits and so many board credits on each of the episodes. So I was gonna say, oh, I guess it was a pretty script driven show, um, versus like a board driven show. But then I don't even know. And then there were some times where you had like two writers and then a bunch of writers, or one board artist and a bunch of board artists on an episode. So I was wondering generally like what was the relationship between like the board artists and the writers, and like where you fit into that.
Well, I like story is really important to me, and it was a script driven show. It definitely was a script driven show. But because I started my career as a board artist, I write scripts for board artists, right? So I always think super visually. And so we would have story meetings with directors and people who drew and people who wrote all together, and we would write the story together. Then we'd have writers go off and write the script, and then script would come back to me, and myself and my co-EP Rob Renzetti would kind of do our pass on the script. But what I always do when I'm doing a pass on a script, I'm basically prepping it for a storyboard artist. I'm writing what I would draw.
Yeah.
So it's sort of my first way to direct the episode, of just basically writing description down of like the shots I want, how I want stuff cut, and what the dialogue would be. So it's not specifically board driven, but it is board driven because it's written by a board artist essentially. So then I would hand that off to my board artists, and we would meet with the directors and the board artists and myself, and we would just go through the script.
Yeah.
And they might pitch visual ideas and like, oh yeah, you can cut this or whatever. And so we would just kind of work through it that way.
Yeah.
Before anyone kind of put pencil to paper. And so, and one of the reasons I switched to scripts is just because there were times where I would get, when we were a board driven show, I would get a board that's 300 pages long and it wasn't working, and I'd get a week to fix it, and it would derail production. It would just bottleneck everything. But if I got a script that I wasn't feeling was 100% there, I could fix the script in a day. I could fix the script in an afternoon. So it just helped the thing move through production quicker, really.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Were there any like specific moments or scenes or things that you knew like, oh, I'm going to board this, or like I already know exactly how this is going to go and I'm just going to handle it? Like, was that kind of more when you would come in and board something?
Well, I didn't necessarily do a lot of like hand drawing. I did a lot of boarding and thumbnailing stuff on like the pilot.
Yeah.
For sure. But I also just hire a team of people who I like their instincts for storyboarding. And so I can go, you do this. I work with a lot of people who just get what I like, know what I'm looking for. But yeah, and a lot of times, sometimes the storyboarding is dictated by the music. We had a lot of the tracks written, the kid, theme tracks and stuff written ahead of time. So a lot of times I would write scripts to the board.
Yeah.
Or I would actually take the sound wave file of the song of the song and like where the beats are, and I would literally go cut to this here, cut to this here, cut to this here, now cut to this here. So just think of it like visual storytelling to music. So sometimes I would just do that and then give that to the board artist, and that would be their roadmap of like how to cut it. So I wasn't necessarily doing the drawings, but I was kind of directing the boarding.
Yeah, cool. Oh man, that sounds so cool. That like I didn't realize that you would like have had the songs that early.
Well, that's the essence of cartoons, right? They all started as music, like visuals put to music. So that goes back to like Looney Tunes and Symphony are based on drawing pictures to music, Yeah. So, and that was like, even when I'm developing the show, one of the first things I think of is what is the soundtrack? What is the music? What's the driving force behind it? So when we started developing Kid, I reached out to Andy Bean, who I worked with on Wander Over Yonder, and said, okay, I need you to be this early 70s garage band called Dr. Fang and the Gang and start writing these songs as this band.
Yeah.
And so he started giving me just music, and then we, like I said, we would storyboard to that and use that as the template for the filmmaking.
That's amazing. So I guess like for me, wanting to get a tiny bit more into like thematics here, like being a fan of your past series, like there are some clear like through lines, and not to like kind of armchair analyze you a little bit, sorry, but like there obviously are like clear things that like you've wanted to explore over your career, and it's like superpowers and sci-fi, and then like, you know, these unexpected heroes and outsiders and underdogs.
Mhm.
You know, like you have preschool superheroes in the Powerpuff Girls, but even in Rosa as well, and like
Mhm.
Wander, and Mac from Foster's, and Kid, you know, are these people that have like this kind of unwavering faith in, I guess, like a world that wants them to grow up faster,
Mhm.
and like move on. And so like for me, like as an outsider, again, just like commenting, like it just
Right.
feels like this show in particular, like Kid Cosmic, feels like very much like a culmination of these things that you've been like experimenting with and building towards. um and it's just like, it's exciting for me to see that.
Oh,
For,
cool. Yeah,
yeah.
Frank Angones, who I originally developed the series with, along with my wife Lauren. He said Kid Cosmic is the most Craig McCracken show Craig McCracken's ever made. It's just
Yeah.
like, because it is all of that. It's got science fiction from Wander. It's got superheroes from Powerpuff. It's got an odd assortment of oddballs from Foster's. So yeah, and none of that was intentional. It just sort of just happened as I was building it. I'm like, oh yeah, this is just the kind of the sandbox I like to play in.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of putting it all in there.
Yeah, and I love Kid especially because I love that he starts out as like this super confident kid. Like my favorite, like when it first happened, like the very first episode, he picks up the rings and he's like, finally. And I
Yeah.
remember like my husband and I were just like, finally, like, why is he saying that? And I was just like, the confidence of this
Oh,
child. And I loved that. And I love that the show at the same time, like it was like a very, very much like a expectations versus reality, like wake up call for him. And it was sad, you know, it was legitimately upsetting to see him struggle and come to terms with that. But it was so rewarding to get to see a character push past that and come out of it like just like a better person and like a more understanding person and a better hero, I guess, too, as
right, right.
well.
Right. Well, that was the goal of it all along,
Yeah.
is the balance between fantasy and reality. Like the kid has this preconceived idea of how this is all going to go down. He gets superpowers. He's always wanted it,
Hmm.
but the reality of it rears its ugly head and it's a lot harder.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to explore, because a lot of kids superhero characters are very aspirational, right? It's like, don't you want to be that? And
Hmm.
I would rather tell a story about this is who you really are.
Hmm.
Because I mean, I had that supreme confidence when I was a kid. I was 12 years old making comic books and not understanding why I wasn't ready to be published.
Yeah.
You just have that bold confidence as a kid, and it's sort of infectious and really likable.
Hmm.
And I just wanted to explore the idea of like, well, what would happen if a kid like that got this opportunity to
Yeah.
be a hero? What would that be like? And how would he kind of deal with that and emotionally deal with that when it wasn't as easy as he thought? Also, like in a lot of superhero movies, there's always a montage of the hero sucking. And to me, that's the most human moment and most relatable moment. But then they quickly get great, and you never have that. And I was
Yeah.
like, why don't we do a show that just takes place during that time period when they're
Yeah.
not good? And I also didn't want to do a story that was about like, hey, if there's a bad guy, if you just beat them up with your powers, you win.
Hmm.
Like I didn't want to promote violence is the thing that will solve your problems, right?
Hmm.
And so the theme we came up with was heroes help, not hurt. And so I wanted the kid to learn that. Like a real hero, it's not about powers or flying or doing anything like that. It's just being kind and helping those, even those you may have deemed to be villains and bad guys. Like
Hmm.
that to me was a good message to put in the world.
Yeah. No, there were so many great sentiments and even like great kind of phrases that were introduced really early and had like nice payoffs. Like even just the was it freaking out, breathe it out? Like I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah.
I have to remember that. That's
Oh
a
yeah.
good one. Like,
Oh yeah. I need
yeah.
that too. I do that, yeah, all the time.
Yeah. And I love that too, because I feel like for me as a kid, like some of my favorite shows were ones that I maybe as a kid couldn't articulate why I liked it so much, but like it like something like nestled inside me and stuck with me. And I feel
Mhm.
like a lot of the stuff that you put here are like those really important things that like a kid's gonna get a little bit older and then they're gonna like maybe revisit the show or they're just gonna remember like, oh, I love this show. And it's like those are like those like nuggets of just like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, like this show, like this show gets it kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that was intentional, and part of that was me. I felt that same way about stuff I grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
Like my father passed away when I was 7 years old, when I was really young.
Mm-hmm.
So when I saw E.T. and I saw Elliot not having his dad and having his mom sort of freaking out trying to take care of 3 kids. Like, he resonated with me in a character a lot deeper because I'm like, oh, I know what you're going through, right? So this friendship, this alien that you've just met, it's something you really need in your life. And
Yeah.
so, and I remember those types of stories just sticking with me throughout my whole life, and not just being a fun, cool movie I saw when I was a kid. I was like, I am that kid.
Yeah.
I relate to that. And so I kind of wanted to instill that same thing with this project as well.
Yeah.
Like being sincere and allowing kid to show a range of emotions, like allowing him to make mistakes, allowing him to be frustrated, allowing him to be sad, allowing him to just kind of grow as a human being.
And like, that's definitely a testament to you getting to do like a narrative,
right,
where like this was somebody who experienced like a great loss at a young age. And yeah, it's like, for me, like I felt like he was like lacking control. Maybe he even had like some survivor's guilt about his parents. And I felt like it was handled in such a nuanced way where it was never like, you know, the death of his parents was never directly addressed or anything, but it was just like very subtly like weaved in the story. And then Chuck was like a jerk about it in one episode. So like he addressed it, but that's because he was being mean.
Right.
But yeah, but it was just like, I love that kind of nuance.
And his goal to be a hero was to stop bad things from happening, because a really bad thing happened to him very early age. And at that age, that's his way of processing it. If I can get powers and be a hero, then I'll be fine forever. I'll be safe, right? And it's like, well, no, not necessarily.
Yeah.
It's going to be harder.
Yeah. Like, it was strange because, it was like not to say it was, I'm like, it was like such a joyful show about, this character is going through grief and like, but it was like delightful.
We try to make it fun. Even though there's heavy stuff in there, we bounce it out with silliness.
And like there were, oh my God, there was also just some of the humor, like right away, like the thing that I laughed the most about was there was one scene where Rosa, threw the canister of like aliens into space, and then the next episode they're frozen dead in space, and then she's just like, oh, and they're just like, oh, just taking a nap, and I like,
there's real life consequences all the time, right? It's like that idea of real life consequences is a big part of Kid Cosmic.
And not to bring this up, but like, I love that, like, kind of going off of that, like the subtlety and the nuance. I love that it kind of did get like a little bit political without being super blatant. Like the Earth First sentiment definitely rings different in 2020, 2021. And like, just the immediate distrust of an outsider who comes through, the need to be a dominant force and not like just coexist like equally. And like, I really appreciated that kind of, I guess, trust that you would put in an audience to like have that. And it's not like, again, it's not like preachy or anything.
And that was, and we put that in there intentionally, but it wasn't even a direct reaction to the political climate we're living in now, or the world we're living in now. It was just a matter of like, that's just true. That's, be a good person, be kind, be decent, be helpful. Don't be judgmental. Like, these are all good, positive things that human beings need to learn. And it's also something you see lacking in a lot of superhero stuff. Like, a lot of modern superhero stuff are afraid of letting the heroes be kind, or afraid of letting heroes be helpful and good people, right? You hear all this stuff like, well, you can't make Superman a Boy Scout anymore. And I'm like, why not? That's why he's great. That's why he's lasted. That's why he's inspired children throughout the world and continue to inspire people. Like, there's something good about that. Like, don't shy away from that. And so I wanted to have a positive message.
And I feel like it's so much more important today too, to see more young male characters that have that sensitivity and vulnerability. Like, two I think of right away are like Aang from Avatar: The Last Airbender, and like Steven from Steven Universe, where it's like, we need more just like kind, gentle boys that doesn't mean that they're weak. Like, that's a strength.
No, not at all. No, and that's definitely something I want to perpetuate and just not perpetuate, that's not the right word, but just to show, to kind of show that people have a range of emotions. Boys, girls, everybody deals with it. It's what life's all about. And you have to kind of go through these things and experience these things, and that's all okay. It's okay to have that. It's okay to get mad. It's okay to get frustrated. It's okay to get sad.
Yes.
It's it's old school Mr. Rogers, Jim Henson stuff, just like, being good, positive and good.
Yes. I was like, nice old guys in sweaters.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, kind of going along with that, like, I kind of felt like, yeah, like this past year, and I'm sorry I keep doing this to you. Again, I know that a lot of your stuff was being developed before this, but it's just like, I felt like it was just so timely too, because I felt like, the not just in the last several years, but even before that, there were all these bad situations happening in the US and in the world. And so much of it, I feel like the conversation has shifted. I feel like there's constantly a back and forth of like things being an individual's problem versus like more of a systemic problem or a bigger problem. And I feel like, especially, I know for me, like during the pandemic, so many things have felt like, yeah, like out of your control. And I know for me, I really like valued like this team of, again, like these local heroes, and like it kind of being like, while there's only so much an individual can do, like individuals together can do big, amazing things. And I feel like that's such an important thing right now, especially. Because it's like through the actions of like local heroes, like, and like you could be one too. It's like you start to see change on a bigger scale.
Yeah.
And I feel like we need more stuff like that now, that it's not
Yeah.
just like, yeah, like one big superhero saving the day, that it's like, no, it's like a collective effort.
Right. And that was sort of a conscious choice, is just let it be regular people, just the random people that are in your neighborhood. They all can do great things if they work together and, try to do the right thing. I mean, and that's sort of the idea that we wanted to kind of say with Kid Cosmic, is it really, we always said it's not about the powers, it's about the people. And that was sort of the theme of the story. And even though Kid had lost his parents, by the end of it, he's gained this family with his community. And he kind of starts out as the weird kid that they're not sure of, and they drives people crazy. But at the end of it, he's built this community of this family who he's not alone, right? He's got them, and he's not only made this family of humans that he's connected with, he's bonded with these people from other planets, right? It's kind of celebrating that sense of community and togetherness, and that we're not alone, right? That's sort of one of the ideas.
And I loved like it's just a small thing, but like in the last episode, I love that Joe's mom is like flipping through her phone, but at first you don't realize it's her, you assume it's Joe, and then there's like that subversion of it, oh, it's her mom actually like reminiscing. And it's like, it was so fun to see like even the minor characters kind of have like them get like a little bit more involved in the plot and stuff. And it's just like seeing that like even like the random people at like the diner it's like they're all like complicated real people.
Yeah, that's sort of the idea, is everybody grows from this. Everyone's affected by it, right? They all because of this kid who finds these rings of power, or these stones of power. It's like because of that event, it kind of changes that town and that community. It's really exciting to have people see it, because we've been working on it for so long, and you just get so close to it. You're like, does it work? Do people like it? Are they paying attention? Is it like, does it work? So it's just nice and refreshing to talk to someone who's seen it, and that's really good.
No, I was gonna say, like, I guess, like my kind of final question was that I was very excited to see what I hope is a setup for the future. I understand if you like can't actually comment or don't know yet. But like it was very cool.
We know everything.
Yes.
We know where it's going.
Cool. But yeah, it was very exciting to kind of see the story like almost end, and then there was like the time gap, and then it was, because I was just like, oh, like this, because it was a very great self-contained like one season story. And I felt like if he never had the ring again, it was almost like that would have been fine, like he had made peace with that. But then like we all kind of wanted him to get the ring back, so then he got it back, and I was just like, yes, he got it back. So I hope that there's more art going on in your brain
there's more to the story, and there's more to explore, and it's just kind of expanding on the themes of what it really means to be a hero, and exploring other characters, and just kind of going further and going back to Tintin. I sort of saw it like that, like each Tintin book was a self-contained adventure, but then you could go on another adventure with this same cast of characters, and it might be a different experience, but the thing that grounds you to the first story was these people. And
Mhm.
so that's sort of what we're doing with Kid as well. It's like, yeah, we're telling new adventures, but the core team is the same, and
Yeah.
about these people.
Cool. Well, I
Yeah.
hope I get to see a lot more of it and a lot more of their story.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I'm a big fan of the local heroes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate
Yeah,
it too.
and congrats again on the show. I hope it does wonders. I'm sure it will. I've been
I hope
seeing just
so.
like a lot of people excited for it.
Yeah, we're really proud of the work, and it was really great opportunity to make it. And I am so thankful for Netflix for allowing us to make this kind of a show and
Hmm.
trusting us to do this serialized type of story. And I just wanted to do this for so long, to just tell a longer story.
Yeah. Now I'm happy about that, and yeah, I hope to see more of it. And I'm just whatever happens, like whatever you work on next, I'm excited to see.
Well, thank you. Appreciate
Yeah.
that. Thanks so much.